Everyone, and welcome to today's video. This is lesson 4 of the WIDA ACCESS listening preparation, and today we're going to be talking about the language of mathematics. You can go ahead and read the introduction on your own. You can pause the video, read this slide, and then restart when you're ready to continue. So the listening practice in this lesson focuses on mathematics. The language of mathematics includes vocabulary and phrases related to numbers, operations, and problem solving. And this might involve understanding ideas like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, as well as concepts such as fractions, percentages, and equations. It may also include language for describing relationships like greater than, less than, and equal to, along with instructions for solving word problems. So once again, I'll let you read these listening comprehension tips on your own, and then when you're ready, restart the video to continue.
Percentages. A math class is learning about percentages. Listen and answer the questions about percentages.
And these are some questions you can think about before you listen. What is a percentage? We have an example here. It's another way to express a fraction. And what are some ways that people use percentages? It could be to divide materials. People use them in recipes, so there's a number of ways. Test scores are sometimes expressed in percentages. So there's a number of ways that people use percentages.
Take a moment now to read the answer choices. Now listen and answer the question.
Today, we're learning about percentages. A percentage shows a part of something. For example, 50% means half. If you have 10 chocolate bars, 50% of them would be 5 chocolate bars. Another example is 25%. This means 1/4 or 1 out of 4. So if you have 8 pieces of pizza, 25% would be 2 pieces of pizza. Percentages help us understand parts of things.
What is 50% of 10?
All right, so what is 50% of 10? You're going to choose the answer from the choices and then restart the video when you're ready to continue. So the correct answer is answer B. 50% of 10 is 5, and you can find that here. Stated 50% means half. Half of 10 is 5, so option B is the correct answer.
The teacher continues explaining about percentages. Listen and answer the questions.
And these are a few questions to think about before you answer. How do you calculate a percentage of another number, and then maybe give some examples. So you might want to make sure that you know how to do that math operation.
Take a moment now to read the answer choices. Now listen and answer the question.
Let's talk about how to find a percentage of a number. If we want to find 10% of 100, we think of 10% as 10 out of 100. Since 10% of 100 means 10 parts out of 100, the answer is 10. Here's another example. If you want to find 20% of 50, you think of 20% as 20 out of 100. This would be 10 out of 50. So 20% of 50 is 10. Percentages help us find parts of a whole number easily.
What is 10% of 300?
All right, choose the answer that you think is correct, 10% of 300, and then restart the video to continue. So the correct answer should have been B, 10% of 300 is 30.
The teacher continues explaining about percentages. Listen and answer the questions.
All right, and then here are some questions to think about before you listen. What is a fraction? And we have some examples of fractions here in this middle line on the number line. What is a decimal? The decimals are at the top line. And how do fractions and decimals relate to percentages? Well, we could see that 0.1 is the same as 1/10, and those are both equal to 10%. So actually, percentages are just another way to express numbers that are either in their decimal or their fractional form.
Take a moment now to read the answer choices. Now listen and answer the question.
Let's look at how to convert between percentages, decimals, and fractions. Let's start with 50%. To turn 50% into a decimal, remove the percent sign and divide by 100. So 50% becomes 0.5 as a decimal. Now, to write it as a fraction, think of 50% as 50 out of 100, which can be simplified to half. So 50% is the same as 0.5 and half. Let's try another example. If you have 25%, you divide 25 by 100 to get 0.25 as a decimal. Then write it as a fraction, 25 out of 100, or 1/4 after simplifying. Remember, converting between these forms can help us understand numbers in different ways.
Imagine you need to explain how to convert 75% into a decimal and a fraction to a classmate. Which steps would you include to help them understand?
All right, you can choose your answer and then check. So the answer is B. Start out by dividing 75 by 100 to get the decimal form, which is 0.75. Then write it as 75 out of 100 and simplify to 3/4.
Fractions. This mathematics teacher is talking about fractions. Listen to the teacher's explanations and examples.
And here are some questions to think about. What are fractions? So we have some examples here. All of these are fractions. What is a numerator? The numerator is the top number in the fraction, and the denominator is the bottom number in each fraction. All right, so you want to listen and take some notes, and then you'll look at these pictures to see which one would be the answer once you hear the question.
Take a moment now to look at the answer choices. Now listen and answer the question.
We use fractions all the time without even realizing it. Imagine you're baking cookies and you need 3/4 cup of sugar. Now imagine that you want to make only half the amount. What should you do? To figure out how much sugar you need, multiply 3/4 by half. Here's how you do it. First, you multiply the numerators. That's the top number in each fraction. So 3 times 1 equals 3. Then, you multiply the denominators, the bottom numbers. 4 times 2 equals 8. So, 3/4 times half equals 3/8.
How many cups of sugar are needed to make half the amount of cookies?
So choose the picture that you think represents the answer. Okay, here the correct answer is D, which represents 3/8 of the amount. And then this shows how these are the steps that you would need to come to that 3/8 answer.
The teacher continues explaining about fractions. Listen and answer the questions.
Okay, and then here's some things to think about before listening. What are the people in the picture doing? So they're baking a cake. And how can using fractions help them? Might tell them how many ingredients go into the cake, how much frosting that they need to cover the cake. So those are some things that you might use fractions for in this instance.
Take a moment now to read the answer choices. Now listen and answer the question.
Let's say the recipe calls for 2/3 cup of flour, but you only have 1/3 of a cup available. To figure out how much of the recipe you can make with the flour you have, divide 1/3 by 2/3. Here's how it works. When you divide fractions, you flip the second fraction and multiply. So 1/3 divided by 2/3 becomes 1/3 multiplied by 3/2. First, multiply the numerators. 1 multiplied by 3 equals 3. Then multiply the denominators. 3 multiplied by 2 equals 6. So, 1/3 divided by 2/3 equals 3/6, which simplifies to half. This means you can make half of the recipe with the flour you have.
Which phrase correctly describes the result of dividing 1/3 by 2/3?
Okay, go ahead and choose your answer. And the correct answer is B. You only have enough flour for half the recipe. And this is the description that they gave of how to come to that conclusion.
The teacher continues explaining about fractions. Listen and answer the questions.
Right? These are some questions to think about before listening. What's the boy in the picture doing? Well, he's eating a chocolate bar. And how might fractions be useful to him? Maybe he needs to share with another person and figure out how to split the chocolate bar. Those might be some ways that fractions might be useful.
Take a moment now to read the answer choices. Now listen and answer the question.
Multiplying fractions helps us figure out portions of portions. Imagine a chocolate bar that's 3/4 of its original size. You decide to eat half of what's left, which means you're eating half of 3/4. To calculate this, multiply half by 3/4. First, multiply the numerators. 1 multiplied by 3 equals 3. Then multiply the denominators. 2 multiplied by 4 equals 8. So, you're eating 3/8 of the original chocolate bar.
After you eat 3/8 of the bar, how much of the original chocolate bar remains?
Right, go ahead and choose the correct answer. And after you eat 3/8 of the bar, how much of the original bar remains? The answer is A. Looks like there is a mistake on this slide. This should be A, not B. And this is the calculation to arrive at that answer. All right, so which questions did you find the easiest and why? Which questions were difficult to answer and why? And what are some things that you need to remember when you take the WIDA Access listening test? Well, that brings us to the end of today's video. Please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.